I'm curious how you process sort of when Rhule's talking, because DB and I obviously kind of view the way he says things and what he says through a certain lens. Like
Right.
we feel like he's a very philosophical coach, and we tend to appreciate that about him. But I'm always wondering how other people process the things he says. Like as you're going out there and he says things like better people make better
Hmm.
Huskers, and talking about technical aspects versus tactical aspects. Like how do you process that kind of in real time while you're listening to Rhule
Well,
talk?
what's funny is I actually, when I was re-listening back to it this morning, getting ready,
Hmm.
I actually wanted to ask you the same question, like
Okay.
inversely, because I feel like we're on different planes of hearing this because this is now the third summer, the third August, close to August that we have
Hmm.
heard these type of comments. And what I've come to realize that I've come from Rule, and people notoriously know that I am a Carolina Panther fan as well. So
Hmm.
I was already like arm length away from Matt Rule when he first came
Sure.
to Nebraska.
Yeah.
But then over time, bought into his process just through listening to him regularly, being, part of the media, trying to gather what he does. I thought that very first year, that very first summer, and especially last year, just because of the notoriety that he picked up, all of the different media that we acquired from Nebraska, whether it was Chasing Three, him on podcasts, him going about and touting about Nebraska
Hmm.
football, it came across as partly, for me personally, a bit eye rolling and a bit of I almost felt like it was like him like venting frustration and complaints at different times. But now in year 3 that we've heard kind of the same types of content, the
Hmm.
same types of speeches, the same type of message over and over again, it does sound like now that people have bought into what he has been saying from the first day. He's never changed that tone. He's
Hmm.
never had to adjust what he's said. And he's never had to say, hey, we're actually like changing this now because it didn't work. And it was little things like the single digit numbers,
Hmm.
right? So the very beginning, when the single digits were introduced, people thought it was the end of the black shirts and people thought it was the end of these
Hmm.
traditions and all this other stuff. And Rule just came in and said, no, this is just a philosophy of our program. It's a
Hmm.
philosophy of our system and how we want to do stuff. I remember being at a radio station in Kearney and reporting on that and doing a sportscast and just saying, I mean, what kind of a big deal is this really?
Hmm.
Like, what does this really matter? And of course, that first year, notoriously, Jeff Sims was one of them, and you got
Famously, yeah.
you got a couple of other single digits in there that I'm sure people were like, okay, sure. But then the second year rolls around and people are more acclimated. They're looking forward to seeing who the single digits would be. And again, the single digits, some of them were very notable. Nash Hutmaker, and you've got Ty Robinson. You got a couple of other guys on there that people were excited
But
for.
then you also have like Tommy Hill, who didn't really have the year that you were hoping,
Right.
whether for injury or whatever other reasons.
Now we'll see who the single digits are this year,
Hmm.
but now it's a basis of their program. And you can hear the way that he talks about it now and how the players have attached themselves to it and how he says, I don't have to do anything with that
Hmm.
anymore because the players take over. They have done it. And I thought his main comment about a player-led program doesn't mean that they get to decide when practices are. They
Yeah.
get to decide how this program is run when we're not here, when I'm not around. I thought that was incredible. And it's not only did he convince me over the past 3 years of like what the program is building to and what everything kind of lays out and means,
Hmm.
but it also, I think, relays back to how the team's actually responding to all of this too. Because as we've mentioned, it's one of those things from the very beginning. He had to get people to buy out of old philosophies and old programs to buy into his new one. And clearly, over time, it took a little bit of process and training, right?
Hmm.
It was taking the bad dog out of the shelter, out of a bad home, and making him the good dog that he always was, right?
Yeah.
These players were always good. They were always talented. They just needed a different place to perform to be better. And they've bought into that now. And so now I'm actually more in
Yeah.
than I've ever been in this year 3 because I can see it and I can hear it just after that one practice because you can hear the way that everyone has bought into it.
I think the single digit thing is actually really interesting because I think you can tell by who they choose to be single digit players how the program is coming along with the way that the players sort of view everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in year 1, right? And I don't know what Jeff Sims was like as a teammate or as a worker or whatever. Obviously, as a player, it didn't work out, but it felt a lot like, oh, Jeff Sims is the quarterback. He should probably get single digit,
Yeah.
right? And, there's some other guys that you look at and you're like, oh, they're this guy. They should probably get a single digit. Or, oh, they're the best guy on the team. They should probably get a single digit. Not. And I think as you progress through year 1, 2, and 3, it's going to start to reflect more the values of the program and less the talent of the player.
Yeah.
Now, if those overlap, that's awesome, right? Like I've been really curious what's going to happen if Dylan Raiola gets voted a single digit number because he's like very famously like number 15.
Yeah.
And, I think that's on like his NIL stuff and whatever. So it's going to be really interesting if he gets voted. And it's like, what does he do?
Well, I think he can decline the single digit, but yeah.
I know, but I actually.
But you're right. It's the philosophy of like, you want me to represent this,
but
so
also,
will I do it?
Well, that's the other thing is, right? Like, I think it would say a lot, and not that I even think it's a bad thing if you were to decline the single digit number, but because I think last year, like Jamari Butler got voted one, but
Yeah.
and he wore it for part of the year,
And then
but he just
switched
felt,
and Shavers took it.
yeah, he just felt more comfortable in a different number, so he went back, and that's fine. But I do think, especially in a position if you're Dylan, and there's been times when you've been from the outside looking in, you've seemed bigger than the program, right? I do think it would really be interesting to see if he would sort of not humble himself, but accept that and say, hey, me representing you as a single digit is more important than my brand as 15, right? That I think would be really interesting to see how that plays out. I don't know if it matters. I really don't.
Right.
But I do think that would be interesting. And if he does do that, I think it's more of a positive if he does do it than if a negative if he doesn't.
Yeah,
right? And he might not even get voted one. That's obviously not a given. There's a lot of older guys that have been around and that I think would be good representatives.
You want to put I'm willing to say this right now that I think I can put my whole 100% stock in a new single digit player receiving a single digit this year, on at least on the offensive side. I know 100% that this guy's going to get it. I'd be shocked if he didn't.
Who?
Ja'Cory Barney.
Oh yeah.
I think everything that we've heard from Ja'Cory Barney, and even Rhule mentioned it yesterday about how Ja'Cory Barney got John Hole out of his, his hole.
Yeah, no, he said he maybe saved his career as a kicker by encouraging him and stuff like that. And he challenged him to do that in other areas. And you mentioned him doing that at the Team Jack Road race and kind of taking these leadership positions. I think Ja'Cory Barney would be really stunning if he wasn't one. He seems to represent both the talent and the character and culture that the program's striving for. I wonder about guys, and I know he hasn't played that much yet, but I wonder about like a Riley Van Poppel who chose to accept a red shirt last year when he could have played, he could have been useful, he could have been helpful, and he went through probably what was not a super fun season for him and chose to do that because, I mean, he believed in the coaching staff.
He bought into the program.
He bought in that this was going to be better for him, and he trusted that it was going to be better for the program because they're not going to have Ty and Nash this year.
Yeah.
So they need a little extra time with Riley Van Poppel. Like a guy like that's super interesting to me. I do wonder about like a Cam Lenhart. He's been very like even when he wasn't playing at his best last year, you still got to talk to him. Like he was a guy that they put out there. It seems like they're very comfortable with him representing the program, but that's a coach's thing too. I don't know if the players view it that same way. So I do think that dynamic's really interesting, but kind of back to my original point with it, I do think over time, and maybe it starts to be this year, you'll see the guys that the coaching staff values at a really high level in terms of what they bring to the program outside of just talent and what the players – like when those things start to line up, I think you're in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Like if the coaches would say, all 10 of those guys is who we would have picked for single digits, then I think you're in a really good spot in terms of how the player-led program part of it.
I wonder if you did hit Rhule with True Serum and you asked him over the past 2 years, how many of those guys do you feel deserved those, spots as the single digit guys, the guys that you want to represent, the 10 best of your program? I wonder how many he would say, yeah, in those years, we might have had a couple that I would have done differently, but we don't know because that's the in and outs of the program. Again, just like you said, we can see what Jeff Sims did on the field, but we don't know what Jeff Sims was like from April till August when he had his 4 interception day against Minnesota. We don't know what that player was. We don't know what he was like in meetings and locker rooms and everything else, right? But in that same sense, it does feel like we feel so much more uniformity in the sense of what the team is and how they speak about each other and how they speak about the program. And it's not a bad thing. I don't think it's a coach speak thing. I think they are all genuinely bought in.
No, it's an alignment thing.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great way to phrase it. Like it does. It feels every tire is going the same direction. Nothing's wobbling. No one is, starting to peter off by any means. Like, everyone is going in the same direction.
They're trying to get the Venn diagram to be a circle, right? If this is the 10 that the coaches would pick and this is the 10 that the players would pick, they want that Venn diagram to be a circle. I don't think it has been yet. I think there's at least a few last year and probably more than that the year before that didn't quite there was some overlap, but they didn't quite line up directly. I do think, I think it's a nice spot check too, in terms of the coaches being able to get a gauge on the players' mentality and how the players view sort of their own program, right? So I think it is a really valuable tool. I mean, yeah, you can use it as a thing to motivate players and be like, oh, yeah, I want to get that single digit, stuff like that. But I also think there's a practical, like, it's a check-in on the players' mentality where, you are sort of giving the entire locker room a little bit of truth serum.
Yeah.
And being like, hey, how do you feel about your teammates? Who do you think is the best representative of what we're doing? And if what they bring you are a bunch of guys that don't really fit what you're trying to build as a program, then that's a reality check as a coach where you guys say, oh, we got to do a better job of instilling the things we care about. I think this year will be the closest, maybe it's not a total overlap, but this year I think will be the closest to them having alignment on who those 10 guys would be.
Yeah.
If they even vote all 10. I don't think they
Right.
have to. I don't think that's a requirement. But if they even vote all 10, however many it ends up being, I do think that you're going to get closer and closer and closer to getting the same 10 guys that the coaching staff would pick. And I think that's actually really important. So I know that the single digit number things does kind of cause some people to eye roll like it did with you. And you're just like, okay, who cares?
Right.
Whatever.
And that was just a year one thing. So it was like, okay. So,
yeah.
Because I wasn't bought in at the time.
Yeah.
That was the other part too. And I'm sure, just like you said, the Venn diagram thing, there had to have been people on that team, 2023, that heard about the single digit stuff. And they're like, okay, like, let's just get out there and practice, coach. Like, let's not have to worry about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Derek in chat, didn't Rhule say yesterday he doesn't like the quarterback seeing the single digit? Yes, that's true. So maybe not necessarily, but I don't, again, like you had said, I don't think if the entire team was like, no, Dylan is one of our 10 guys that represents this program, that represents who we are, then they're going to vote for him.
Yeah, that's the thing is he also said very much that he is not going to interfere with the voting process.
Yeah.
So if the players vote for Dylan, Dylan's going to get one, right? Yeah. I would bet on Heinrich getting one. I think I'd bet on Harburg getting one. A single digit number.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk about someone who's bought in and all that stuff.
I feel like he's very
and he's well liked. I think I get the feeling that a lot of people really like him.
I think he's very representative of what the program wants to be and what the coaches want the program to be. And I do think there's a high level of respect from his fellow players for always doing what is best for the team, right? Like he could have switched positions a couple years ago, and that probably would have been better for him.
Yeah.
Or if he wanted to be a quarterback, he should have transferred. That would have been better for him, right? But he's a guy that's like, hey, no, I'm a Husker. Like I'm going to be a Husker. I'll do whatever they need me to do.
Yeah. No, and speaking of the tight ends too, I mean, was there a position group that got more love yesterday from general media than the tight ends?
I know. I mean, I felt
like in every single stand-up rundown that I watched online yesterday, it was all about tight ends. Mark Way, which I'm going to mess up a million times.
Yeah, I'm going to say
Mark McWay.
I try so hard not to switch the first and last names. It's a little tricky. No, I mean, if DB was here this morning, I think he'd be doing victory laps around the bar 100%. Here because he's been saying this, I think, since before spring. Because people were freaking out about Borkacher leaving.
Yep.
Right? And Borkacher's a really good player. I would not surprise me if Borkacher makes money playing football at some point. I think he's a really good player. I think that's when DB started being like, hey, like that's a really good room. And I think part of it was a Satterfield thing because he likes Satterfield and he does think Satterfield's a good coach, even if he wasn't the right fit at OC. And obviously Dana's an upgrade over almost anybody at OC, so that's a positive there. But I think people sort of looked at the room and said, he's just doing his buddy a favor by not firing him or whatever. Like, as far as I know and have been told, and I think Rhule so much has said this, like Dana Holgorsen had full autonomy on who his offensive staff was.
Yep.
Like, Marcus Satterfield would not still be here if Dana Holgorsen did not want him here. Mm-hmm. Same thing with everybody else on the offensive staff. He had full autonomy. The only guy he wanted to bring in was Da'Keel Shorts, right? Otherwise, he liked the staff. So I do think there's a lot of validation for DB on the tight end room. And a name that Rhule brought up that I had mentioned a couple times in the spring that I'm interested in because I sort of saw him as a body type replacement for Borkacher is Ingerson from Papillion La Vista.
Yep.
He's like 6'7", big body tight end, got that really huge tight end frame, kind of like Borkature does. He's a guy I'm really interested in. I don't think he's going to play much this year because it's a super deep spot, but I was glad to hear his name get brought up because I think he's got really big potential as a tight end.
And I was sad to hear Demetrius Bell was hurt.
Yeah,
that was a little disappointing to have. But in terms of raw body type, and you get to see them, not going up in 11 against 11, pretty good pass catching group, all things considered, especially get off the bus guys. I mean, that's a pretty good looking group of receivers, especially freshmen. The tight ends looked pretty healthy as well. Of course, we're seeing it from clips and everything else, but they look fast on grass. That's all that matters, right?
Being fast on grass. No, I do think it's going to be a really good pass catching group. I do wonder. I am really interested to see, especially from the tight ends, but from the wide receivers too, as it was a big issue last year, like what they look like as a blocking group, right? Obviously, like Nair and Banks really struggled blocking on the perimeter last year, and especially for being big-bodied guys, like that was pretty disappointing.
Yep.
I do wonder when you switch out like a Borkature for Lindemeyer and Harburg and Carter Nelson, especially Harburg and Carter Nelson, guys that are considered more skill guys. I do think Mac Markway is considered a very good blocker coming out of high school. I believe that was kind of where one of his like big skill sets was. So I don't worry about him as much, but I do wonder, Carter Nelson's not a huge guy for a tight end. Like I know he's put on some weight, but he's an athletic freak, right? So you look at him and you go, okay, how's he going to do blocking? Or is this going to be one of those things when you put Carter in the game, it's a pass play, right? Same thing with Harburg. How's he going to do in blocking in the run game? Or can you keep him in there on pass protection to keep an extra guy in for a second? Like that's the guy where you go, okay, can he be in all these different sets? Or am I giving something away when I put Heinrich Harburg in the game? That's the part I'm going to be really interested. Same thing with Lindemeyer. I think Lindemeyer is probably a pretty balanced version, but I do wonder about some of those guys if you're going to be giving a tell.
Yeah.
Because that's how Lindemeyer got so wide open last year in the Illinois game, is that wasn't a guy that had really been thrown to.
Yeah.
Right? So are you giving something away when you put certain guys in a game or not? That's what I'll be interested to see with the tight end group.
But that's the most interesting part is all of these added pieces and how you can see them fit. Some of these guys we give a little bit more credit to because we are the local media. We've seen them do some certain things. Like Heinrich Harburg could be completely one-dimensional type of tight end, right? He could maybe only have like a couple of routes in his tree that he can run. But when you have an offensive coordinator and an offensive mind that's like Dana Holgerson, it doesn't matter what that player is capable of. If they excel in certain things, a great offensive coordinator fits all of those pieces together to make sure that those offensive players perform at their highest when they can, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, if Dana Holgerson sees that Mac Markway is going to be a great inline receiver more than he is out wide, but then you can put, 3 receivers on the field with him, and you can have, Heinrich Harburg maybe in the backfield or whatever the case is, right? Like you could do all these unique and different things. A great offensive coordinator knows the best positions for each of his skill spots to be able to put them in for success. And this isn't a knock against Marcus Satterfield by any means, but he was an inexperienced offensive coordinator comparative to what Dana Holgerson is right now. And so Holgerson's ability to be able to see the field in different ways and see where he can move different pieces around right now in practices, I think is going to be so beneficial because now you can look at your quarterback and say, you've got these 2 receivers on your right and these 2 different type of receivers on your left, pass catchers, however you want to define them. And you can tell them, all right, you can tell your quarterback, we've got these layers of route concepts, these guys that are going to excel on a deep fly and out. He's got a route breaker. He's got a zone buster. He's got this sort of stuff. And you can let your cognitive ability at quarterback determine and dictate where you can have success in the passing game from there on. And I think that that's really huge because one thing we've heard about Dylan is that he's very cerebral. He can get through. I mean, we've talked about it plenty of times in the past 2 weeks about his completion percentage and how impressive it is compared to other true freshman quarterback that started last year. So if he can use that sense and Dana Holgerson can implement where the talent needs to go, it's going to be a recipe for ultimate success, as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see how Dana Holgerson uses all the weapons, right? Because I do think there's a bunch of guys that you can line up in different spots that you can kind of put all over the field and have success with doing different things. I mean, whether it's Harburg and Carter Nelson, whether it's like Janarin Bonner in the wide receiver room, who's a bigger bodied guy, whether it's like Ja'Cory Barney and Cortez Mills that are really good with the ball in their hands, whether it's Isaiah Mosey, who was a wide receiver, now he's a running back. Obviously, you can do a lot of different things with him. Like I'm really interested to see what that looks like when you've got so many guys that have like positional versatility. I know it's a thing he hasn't really talked about as much this year, but in the first couple of years, Coach Rhule talked a lot about like positionless football and things like that with your skill position players. I think they actually have a group that has a lot of potential to be able to do that with lining guys up all over the field in different spots. And that's one of the things that, I for whatever reason, am a big Gus Malzahn fan in terms of his play calling and things like that. One of the things that I was fascinated by, and the 49ers do this too with Kyle Shanahan, is they can formation you to death.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can run, like they might run 4 plays, but they'll run it out of 8 different formations with 4 different personnel groups and things like that, where they can dictate what their looks are based on how they line up, but they're still going to run this little thing that you wouldn't typically see out of that formation and that you wouldn't typically see with that personnel group. And so the ability to do that and having an offensive coordinator that can take advantage of it is a nightmare for defenses. Like that's genuinely a thing that I mean, it's probably the thing Kyle Shanahan's best at is the fact that he obviously had the players to do it. And without Deebo Samuel, it'll be interesting to see what they do this year. But it was really a matter of like, they might run the same play 4 times in a row out of 3 different formations with 2 different personnel groups. And you never know what it's going to look like because your cues on defense dictate that you line up a certain way or you cover a certain guy or that you check to a certain call. And when you're able to just throw so many different looks at a team, they have no idea what's coming. So I'm actually really excited about that, both positionally and with Dana Holgorsen on the offensive side there.
I thought it was also interesting, too, that Rhule kind of snuck it in there right in the middle. And I don't remember if the question was something about, like, oh, what's been the difference leading into this year compared to other years, but he kind of referenced it that way, that he said that this was like a drama-free summer for him, that he wasn't getting text messages about things that were going on, that he wasn't, worried about certain guys that were out. And not that there are like, there's the Eric Thomas that was like, or Gilbert. Eric Gilbert. Yeah, Eric Gilbert, the tight end. So there was that one obvious situation that happened his first year. But other than that, I don't recall that there being a lot of headaches or issues or other things that happened through the offseason other than him bringing it up and, discussing his own team and that sort of stuff when he would be on traveling and trips and stuff. But related to the team, I don't remember. But him talking about himself that, hey, we didn't have any issues. We didn't have to worry about guys. We didn't have to babysit people. It's one thing Damon's been huge on, right, the past couple of months, is saying if you don't have to have a guy that needs babysat in the locker room when he's out in the community, when he's out doing stuff on his own, if he's going to be going home, you don't have to worry about him and check in on him all the time. I think that is the course for just a great organization. And I couldn't word it the right way, but DB was getting into it a little bit on Twitter with some people who were, taking and piecing apart a couple of things that Rhule had to say. And it's funny how if you take Rhule's comments about his program and the things that he talks about with a football team and apply them to non-football related aspects of life, that's what everyone would agree are steps to being successful, right?
I think so.
And I'll have to go back and see if I can find exactly which clip it was. But I remember I was going to tweet at DB. I just couldn't word it the right way. But essentially, it's funny how many times we listen to something Rhule has to say that has nothing to do with football at all. But because he's a football coach, more people will do what I did at first and just eye roll at it and say, oh, well, that can't apply. Like, just win, right? Just win. That was the big issue yesterday.
Yeah.
But instead, it's no, like, how do you build a great organization? How do you build a growing business? How do you be successful? You have to put things in place. There are no shortcuts. And when you take shortcuts, eventually you will get caught
up with you.
Yes.
I will say that is one of the things that I appreciate the most about Rhule is like we've seen coaches do it other ways, right? We've seen, Urban Meyers turn it around super fast. And you've seen, I don't know what Kurt Cignetti's future looks like at Indiana, but obviously year 1, goes gangbusters. And we see Dion in year 2 go 8-4 or 9-3, whatever they were last year. And like you see these teams turn around quickly and you wonder like, okay, why can't it happen a little bit faster at Nebraska or whatever, right? And maybe it will this year. I think it will, but but we don't know yet. One of the things that I appreciate is that Matt Rhule has never seemed willing to sacrifice wins for what he thinks is important in the rest of life. Like he's not. Some people subscribe to the fact like, well, you got to sacrifice certain things to get in. I mean, we saw it with. We saw it in different eras of Nebraska football where you sacrifice a little bit on the character end to get a high talent level guy, or you sacrifice a little bit when a guy gets in trouble and maybe you don't discipline him the same way that you would somebody who wasn't as talented or things like that. And I what I've always appreciated is he doesn't seem like he's willing to sacrifice any of the other things just because he thinks it might make him win sooner. He really genuinely seems to believe that yes, I can help these young men become better people and better members of society and better students at the same time as becoming better athletes,
Yeah.
right? It's not a one or the other thing for him. It's a holistic approach to coaching. And I think he would even argue that doing those other things does make them better football players. It might just take a little bit longer, right? And so I really have always appreciated that about him. And I hope it's one of the things that I think Nebraskans appreciate about him. Like, I think the reason he feels like one of us is because of that. Nebraskans in general, like, we're not a shortcut people. We're like, do it the hard way, do it
Yep.
the right way, and then get it done, right? I don't want it done fast. I want it done right. And that to me is a very Nebraska, Midwestern, like salt of the earth people sentiment. And it seems like that's how Coach Rhule operates. It seems like that's how he always operates. And, he's always like, hey, if I could do it faster, I would, but this is how it works. And I do think that's why, going all the way back to the single digit number things, I do think that's why it's really interesting to see who they pick this year. Because I feel like we'll learn a lot about the types of players that the players pick and if that lines up with who we imagine the coaches would pick. I think it's going to be pretty close this year, and if it is, I think you're in really good shape.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good sign for the program.